Although it's been getting better, modern media doesn't typically do a great job of representing witchcraft and spirituality. When we're not being portrayed as outright villains, we are new age nutcases or comic relief, or both. That's why when a piece of media gets it right, I want to shout it from the rooftops. It's not always perfect, and it might not serve as a how-to guide for newbie witches, but if we can look past the fantasy and the theatrics, we can sometimes find a glimmer of truth that can be used as a talking point for deeper understanding and critique of modern magical practice. Today, let's talk about 3 things that the Owl House gets right about witchcraft. Hi witches, and maybe not witches who are interested in the Owl House. I'm Aradia, a practicing witch and huge nerd who talks about witchcraft and queerness and pop culture on the internet. So I'm really excited for this video today because while admittedly I am late to the Owl House hype train, once I finally sat down to watch it, I finished all 3 seasons in like 5 non-consecutive days, and it only took that long because I have a witchlet and full-time job. Before we dive in, it should be said that I will be talking about the setting of the Disney Channel's The Owl House today, and while I'm not going over specific plot story points or anything, if you don't like spoilers at all, proceed with caution. The Owl House is a kid's cartoon from the Disney Channel that follows young Luce as she runs away from home to find herself in a fantastical world called the Boiling Isles, filled with witches, monsters, and real magic. At home, Luce's mom is pressuring her to be normal. But this found family that she finds when she goes to the Boiling Isles encourages her to grow and blossom and study magic and be who she truly is. This show was incredibly popular when it was on, with positive representations of friendship and found family and mother-daughter relationships and diverse LGBTQIA+ and non-white characters, including the main character who covers both of those. But today we're going to talk about its representation of magic and witchcraft, because while it may be a kids' show, I have a feeling that the writers kind of knew what they were talking about. By the way, if you like this sort of content and want to see more of it, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on so you get updates when I post a new video. Because Luce is a human, she can't do magic the way the witches and demons of the Isles can. Instead, she finds and uses these strange symbols called glyphs to draw in the energy of the Isle instead of utilizing her bile-filled sac attached to her heart the way that witches do. Yeah, that part might be a little made up. Here in the human world, we have an entire branch of magic that uses symbols to represent intentions. Sigil magic is using geometric patterns and shapes to symbolically represent the practitioner's desire or spell. They have a specific meaning that gets imbued with energy to manifest a desired result. Like Luce uses glyphs to call on the Isle's magic, sigils have historically been used to access and contain energy not naturally available to magical practitioners. Historically, sigils were often used as ceremonial magical tools to harness the energy from spiritual entities like angels and demons. There's a famous grimoire called the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, where Solomon actually transcribes the 72 sigils to correspond to the 72 demon princes of hell. Basically, to know and to be able to transcribe these symbols gives the magician power over that entity to make it do its will. Kind of similar to the idea of knowing the name of a thing gives you power over that thing, like the story of Rumpelstiltskin, but in visual form. Now, maybe the idea of demon work makes you nervous, in which case I should warn you we're talking about demons next, but there are other symbols that we can use as sigils that are probably more familiar to you. Some other recognizable sigils may be the Christian cross or the Jewish Star of David. You can also use runes and other ancient alphabets to represent sigils, because these runic symbols often represented more than just a sound or a letter. They would correspond to an entire idea or way of life. You can even create a sigil based on a power word or phrase by basically boiling down those words into its essential components, but that's a whole other video. Sigils also don't have to be old and established to hold power. There are plenty of different ways to create your own sigils, and it has actually grown as an area of magic in the last few years. There's even this interesting theory that brand logos work as a sort of modern sigil empowerment. Think about seeing those golden arches far off in the distance and suddenly you get a craving for a cheeseburger. Luce even begins to learn how to combine these sigils into bigger images to make bigger and more powerful spells. And what's interesting is the glyphs that she's drawing often visually represent the intention of the spell. So if you look at it from an artistic kind of abstract way, You can almost tell what the glyph is supposed to do based on what it looks like. There's one method of sigil creation in real life that's just like this, using images that are visually representative of what the witch's spell is. If you think about the fact that sigils are often visually representative of their spells, and that we're constantly creating new sigils every day for unique situations, if you really like the Owl House, you could even use Luce's sigils to manifest your own modern day spells. Because if you think about it, the sigil has the power because we believe it has the power, right? And if you really identify with a certain thing, like the Owl House, you can use that imagery to call on your own power. For example, this is the plant glyph. And by looking at the image, you can almost tell that it's meant to be growth of plants because it kind of looks like a flower growing out of that little circle, and the circle represents a seed. So if I wanted to encourage growth in my life, say metaphorically with a business or project, or even literally like keeping my houseplants from dying, I could use this glyph as a way to manifest that desire. And one of my favorite parts of glyph magic in the show is even though demons and witches have this innate ability to cast magic because of their delightful bile sacs, when their magic fails them in certain situations, they have access to this glyph magic too. So glyph magic and sigil magic is completely accessible to basically everybody. You can't draw or create your own images. Somebody else has probably designed a sigil for what you need to do. And even if you can't physically draw it, as long as you can visualize it strongly enough, you can get it to work for you. The idea that not all demons are bad or evil isn't unique to the Owl House either. In the show, there appear to be 3 different types of creatures. There are witches, there are titans, and there are demons. And even the demons get further subcategorized into more specific groups. Although it's a little unclear, and the best resource we have for that is Hootie. So originally, in real life, demon was just a term for a spiritual entity that inhabited the world and interacted with humans. They weren't specifically good or specifically bad. In fact, were often just neutral to maybe slightly beneficial depending on the culture that they came from. They are considered spiritual beings, but like in the show, they also take corporeal form. Modern perspectives on demons as being terrifying evil creatures only out to do you harm is almost exclusively Abrahamic in origin, with most cultures outside of that, specifically Eastern beliefs or polytheistic cultures, viewing demons with a lot more ambiguity. Demons are considered evil in Christian mythology, where they are fallen angels, or sometimes the gods from other pantheons, or even the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, roughly correlated to giants in the Hebrew Bible. These entities are a bit more ambiguous in something like Islamic demonology, where it's often compared to zoology because many demons in Islamic culture are related to animals and have physical manifestations. And some branches of modern magic nowadays, like chaos magic or ceremonial magic, treat demons more as like servitors or egregores in their work. But regardless of whether a culture believes demons are all good, all evil, or somewhere in between, almost every culture and mythology has some way of summoning and binding these entities to do the magician's will. In the Owl House, the demons of the Boiling Isles seem to be a little bit more Islamic in origin, at least in inspiration, because they're very animalistic and typically independent. They're not strictly good or evil, but tend to vary from demon to demon, and can even vary from day to day within a particular demon themselves. And they do get bound into service by a witch, like we see with Hootie being physically bound to the Owl House. Now, the show does not provide comparable practices in the real world like it does with sigils and glyphs, mostly because the demons of the Boiling Isles are made up, but also because if you believe in demonology, it's a serious and dangerous practice, and you don't really want to learn that from a kid's show. But what it does do well is to teach us that not all creatures are created equal, and to not typecast or judge a monster before we understand its true nature. And that's a lesson that we can take outside of witchcraft too. One of the first lessons Ida, Luce's mentor, tries to teach her is that magic comes from the isle itself. The island is essentially a grand entity, one of those titans that I mentioned earlier, that provides the very essence of magic to the world. So magic comes from all around them, from the very nature of the world and the island itself, as shown in the episode where Luce learns the ice glyph from the snowflakes. Because Luce is a human, she uses the glyphs that she learns from the Titan to draw in the innate magic from the environment around her. And she can do this because Luce takes the time to make a genuine connection to the island. She doesn't learn these new glyphs until after she's emotionally connected to her environment around her. In our world, many witches hold a belief called animism, which posits that everything in the natural world has its own spiritual essence. By connecting to the essence or spirit of an animal, a place, or a thing, we can deepen our connection to the natural world, where many witches believe magic comes from. Whether or not you consider yourself an animist, I can almost guarantee you that your witchcraft has a foundation in animism, whether you know it or not. Because the people who created the foundation for modern witchcraft practice that we know today were mostly animists, and you can see their beliefs coming through in a lot of the writings and teachings that we still have. If you've ever talked about your plants, or your crystals, or even your tarot cards as if they have their own unique personality, guess what? That's an animist belief. This idea allows witches to basically connect with anything from the world around them and to draw in that energy and use that power in a respectful and genuine way. Magic is the innate energy that flows through the world around us, including us as people, and we tap into that to fuel our spells. So the fact that Luce can make a genuine connection to the island to then draw upon its energy mirrors what a witch does when they're trying to fuel their spells with something more than just the energy inside of them. Luce taps into the energy of the island to fuel her spells, and witches tap into the energy of nature to fuel ours. The lesson we learn from this is pretty simple. Have respect for nature and for the practice of witchcraft, and the energy is going to come a hell of a lot easier. Owl House is a fantastic show for understanding basic magical concepts like the flow of energy, sigil craft, and having respect for spiritual entities and creatures. If you have little witchlets around, you can use the Owl House as a fantastic teaching tool that's also fun and engaging. And the fact that it has positive BIPOC and queer representation in a world like we live in now does not hurt either. Even if you don't have kids in your life, watching the Owl House can help deepen your perspective for some of the ideas and concepts that we talked about today. And with the recent growing popularity of witchcraft, the ability to think critically about information that you're taking in is really important and often overlooked. Don't believe everything you hear and read on the internet, including me. Learn to think critically, break down the concepts that you're getting, boil them down to their basic components. And watching a show like The Owl House can help us do that because it's providing us with ideas that we can break down in a safe container, like a cartoon, but then take those lessons that we're learning and apply them to the real world. How does Luce learning how to connect with the energy of the Isles help us connect to the energy of our local area? If you've watched The Owl House, please tell me some of your favorite moments of positive representation down in the comments. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. It really helps me get more content in front of more people. And make sure to check out the description box below for links to resources I used in my research, my socials, ways that you can donate and support the creation of this content, and also an invite link to my Discord server, where a great community of different kinds of witches are always coming together and talking about this kind of fun stuff every day, and sharing pet pictures. We do a lot of that too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.